Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're setting our sights on a new book that's making waves even before it's out. Fight: Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House
Oh,
by Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes.
exactly. And our mission, for this deep dive is really to explore what we can sort of figure out about the 2024 election narrative just from the book's Amazon page.
Right.
We'll look at the descriptions, the editorial reviews, their backgrounds, basically give you a solid preview of the dynamics, the key players, Biden, Harris, Trump, and the story they seem to be telling.
Okay, so the title itself, Fight: Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House. That sets a pretty dramatic stage, doesn't it?
It really does.
In the Amazon description, it just throws you right in.
Yeah.
It mentions how the election forced a sitting president to drop his re-election bid. Now, just so we're clear, when you read that, it's not referring to President Biden, who did run.
Right. Important clarification.
Yeah. The book seems to be pointing to the incredibly turbulent nature of the election, maybe leading to someone stepping aside, though, the specifics aren't really detailed in this first look.
Well, what's fascinating right off the bat is just the sense of incredibly high stakes. The
Uh,
description then layers on these almost like unbelievable elements of former president. And yeah, context strongly suggests Trump, who survived felony convictions and a would-be assassin's bullet,
Whoa.
and a vice president, presumably Harris, who was unexpectedly thrust into the arena and ran this 107-day campaign. I mean, these are not your everyday election talking points.
Not at all. It
Yeah.
really paints a picture of an election cycle that was just truly out of the ordinary. And the authors really emphasize this with that phrase, blood sport politics. They
Mhm.
talk about clawing, backstabbing, and rabble-rousing as the, driving forces, not just between parties, but within them, too.
Yeah.
It sounds like this book is really going to get into the raw, maybe uncomfortable realities of modern campaigns. Do you think this level of animosity is new or just more visible now?
That's a really crucial question, isn't it? I mean, while the intensity might feel higher now with, the 24/7 news cycle, social media,
Right.
you could argue that intense political fights are kind of a recurring theme in U.S. history. But what's striking here is how the authors frame it as the driving force behind both Trump's initial success and Democratic setbacks in this election. It really sets a tone of, deep division.
Okay. So moving on to Trump's strategy.
Yeah.
The book's description, it suggests he managed to connect with a pretty big segment of voters, even with all the concerns about his personal conduct.
Uh-huh.
The key, according to this initial look anyway, was tapping into a deep vein of dissatisfaction with the direction of the country. So less about personality, maybe, and more about capitalizing on that feeling that things just weren't working.
Yeah, that resonates with a lot of the analysis we've seen, doesn't it? This idea that, economic anxieties, cultural stuff, just a general unease, it can often outweigh the more, let's say, traditional things about a candidate's character or past. The
Hmm.
description doesn't detail how he did it, but we can probably expect the authors to explore, his specific rhetoric, the rallies, the demographics he targeted with that message.
Okay, turning to the Democratic side.
Mm-hmm.
The picture Allen and Parnes seem to paint, well, it doesn't sound particularly flattering.
No, it does.
You see, Democrats struggled to connect with an electorate that felt gaslit by Biden's insistence that he delivered economic prosperity and his pledge to be a bridge president. Wow, gaslit is. That's incredibly strong language.
Sure is.
This suggests a huge disconnect between the administration's story
Yeah.
and what people were actually feeling. That's powerful, put right in the description. Really speaks to a potential gap, right, between the White House view and voters' lives.
It absolutely does. And it immediately makes you wonder about how effective the party's communication strategy was then. I mean, if a big chunk of voters felt their lives just didn't match the economic success stories, well, that's a massive hurdle for any campaign.
Yeah.
And then it goes on. The description says Biden tore his party asunder, leaving destroyed personal relationships in his wake as he clung to power, and then kneecapped Harris by demanding unprecedented loyalty from her.
Wow.
Okay.
I mean, this paints a picture of really significant internal strife, potential leadership issues within the party.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what specific actions the book will detail to back up such a strong claim.
That is, yeah, a pretty stark assessment of the internal dynamics. It implies that besides just the election challenges, the Democrats were dealing with some serious friction inside, maybe damaged relationships at the top. And that idea of demanding unprecedented loyalty from Harris after Biden's own apparent struggles, that definitely sounds like a key tension point the book will probably get into. And this leads us right to Harris's unprecedented 107-day campaign. The way they highlight it, so short and intense, it strongly suggests it came from unexpected circumstances, very likely connected to whatever prompted, the other president, not Biden, to step aside.
Right.
We don't get many specifics here, so we're left guessing a bit about this rapid campaign. Was it like a whirlwind effort focused on specific voters? The book promises to fill that in.
Well, given that the book's based on interviews with more than 150 insiders,
Yeah.
from the Trump, Harris, and Biden circles, plus party leaders, operatives, it sounds like we're going to get a very intimate, maybe revealing account of what was happening behind the scenes.
Definitely.
These kinds of insider stories often shed light on, personal motivations, the internal debates, the big decisions that shape a campaign.
And what's particularly interesting about that is the potential for just multiple perspectives on the same events.
Yeah.
With that many sources, the authors likely heard a whole range of interpretations about key moments, turning points. It'll be fascinating to see how they weave those different accounts together and if, consistent themes pop up despite all the viewpoints.
It's also important, I think, to consider the authors themselves.
Yeah.
Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes, they wrote Shattered, right?
Yeah.
The bestseller about Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign.
Yep. And Lucky about Biden's 2020 win.
Right. And the reviews for Shattered, they were pretty critical. Described the campaign as like wildly dysfunctional, highlighted this disconnect between the political establishment and voters.
Yeah, if you look at their track record, especially Shattered, it suggests Allen and Parnes have a really keen eye for spotting campaign missteps, internal fights, and those bigger societal things that shape elections. The reviews back then emphasized the detailed, almost minute-by-minute breakdown of failures and that sense of an establishment just not getting the voters. So that past experience probably heavily influences how they approach 2024. We might be looking at another pretty candid, critical examination.
And the early reviews for Fight itself are definitely generating buzz. Words like brutal, scathing, riveting.
Strong words.
Yeah. Kristen Welker on Meet the Press called it a great read, while Kirkus reviews praised its sensible approach of looking at both parties and promised dishy scoops.
Interesting combo.
Right. It suggests it's not just a dry analysis. It aims to be compelling, maybe controversial, with some behind-the-scenes stuff we haven't heard before.
Well, what stands out is that mix of brutal and scathing, with Kirkus mentioning a sensible approach. It sort of implies the authors are delivering some maybe harsh truths or criticisms, but doing it in a way that feels balanced, grounded in their research. And of course, the dishy scoops part. That adds the intrigue, right? It suggests readers can expect some insider details, maybe surprising stories that haven't really come out yet.
So as we kind of wrap up this initial look, what are the big themes or conclusions about 2024 we can piece together from this preview of Fight? It really sounds like Allen and Parnes are showing an election defined by intense political combat everywhere. A lot of dissatisfaction, voters feeling unheard, and significant internal challenges, maybe missteps, within both main parties.
Yeah, and if you connect that to the bigger picture, this first glimpse suggests a potentially, concerning state for American politics. The heavy emphasis on blood sport, the apparent struggles of the incumbent party to connect, the weird circumstances around the candidates, it all points towards a deeply polarized, maybe increasingly volatile political scene. It raises big questions about whether the political system can actually address people's needs when so much focus seems to be on the fight itself, rather than on shared goals or finding common ground.
This has been a really fascinating first look, a deep dive into what seems like a very revealing book. We've explored the early framing of Fight, touching on the unusual circumstances, the intense rivalries, the strategies, and the author's likely perspective from their past work and these early reviews.
Absolutely. And considering the book's portrayal of this intense political combat and the deep divisions it highlights, it leaves us with a pretty big question for you, the listener, to think about.
Okay.
What are the potential long-term consequences? For the American political landscape, sure, but maybe more importantly, for the ability of leaders to actually govern effectively when the fight for the White House is shown as this deeply personal, often brutal struggle, not just a policy debate.
Right.
What does that kind of political environment really mean for the future of leadership in this country? It's definitely something to think about.